Today on the General's Diaries, we feature Lieutenant General Lopa, former Zambia Army Commander. And as we begin the program, we'd want General Lopa to welcome you to this program. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Just tell us more about yourself, your family life, as well as the early military life.
Yeah, I was born Wisdom Lopa in Kamitondo in Kitwe. My schooling was done mostly on the Copper Belt, the initial part. I studied what we used to call Sub-A that time in Chingola at Kasompe Primary School. We used to call them LEA that time, Local Education Authority. Then my father was transferred to Chiralabombwe. By then it was called Bancroft. So I was transferred to Bancroft LEA Primary School, where I did my Sub-B Standard 1 and a part of Standard 2 before my father moved to Kalulushi, where I did my part of my Standard 2, Standard 3, and Standard 4. I think by then I'd become a bit mischievous and my father was not impressed with me. So he decided to send me back home to where my mother came from. That was Luwingu, where I did my Standard 5 and Standard 6 then, and then proceeded to open Luwingu Secondary School in 1966. We were the first people to open that school, because it was the government policy at that time that each district in Zambia must have a secondary school. So they established secondary schools almost in each and every district. So I went to one of those schools. After completion of my secondary education, I worked briefly for what we used to call Zambia Educational Television Services. I was recruited to be a trainee producer and director. So these jobs we are doing, I think we tried to do them a long time ago, in the 70s. After that, there was an advert which came, asking for people to join the army. I applied and we went to Kalewa, where I did my officer selection board, and I was picked, and we came and opened the then Kohima Barracks. It was just being established at that time. So I did part of my pre-officer cadet training at Mutez, which is Kohima Barracks. I was there for about 3-4 months after joining the army, and then I was picked to go and do officer cadet training abroad. Because what used to happen that time, we hadn't established an officer cadet training school in Zambia. So most of the officers who were being recruited were being sent abroad to go and train from almost all over the world. We had people going to India, to Pakistan, we had people going to United Kingdom, people going to Ireland, people going to Tanzania, Sudan at that time. And then I was picked together with a few friends of mine to go and do our officer cadet training in Canada. So after completion of my officer cadet training in Canada, I came back in 1972, and I was posted to Chindwin Barracks in Kabwe, where I was made a platoon commander for about a month or two. Then the CEO by then was a Colonel Whiteman. I think after he looked at me, he said, no, this chap must become the motor officer. not motor transport officer, but motor officer, something to do with bombs, you know. So I was made a motor officer. And I stayed in Arakan, in Chindwin, from the time I was second lieutenant. I became a lieutenant. And then we got involved in training of a battalion from Mozambique, because they had just gotten their independence that time. So we went to Mulungushi, where they were being trained. I was made adjutant of that training facility for the Mozambicans. I think after some time, after they had passed, I was posted from Chindwin Barracks into Tuzeda. Because Chindwin, it was the 3rd Battalion Zambia Regiment. So I was brought to 2nd Battalion Zambia Regiment, which was here in Arakan Barracks. I was posted as adjutant. And I remained adjutant for quite some time. When the promotions start coming, I was moved away from being adjutant and I was made company commander. It was while I was company commander, I remember very well, and we were playing tennis. By then, there was General Masheke. He specifically asked for me to come and play tennis with him. So we were playing tennis. He asked me a few questions. A few weeks later, I was posted to military intelligence. Then I realized that playing of tennis with the chief of military intelligence then was a form of recruiting me to join the military intelligence service. So I went for what we called an induction course. After finishing the course, I was posted to the Ministry of Defense, where the military intelligence service was housed. I became a staff officer to General Masheke, and later on he appointed me as a desk officer and a liaison officer for liberation movements. That time we had the ZAPU and ZIPRA operating from this country. ZANU belonged to, I think, the Shonas, and then ZAPU belonged to the Ndeveles. You know, there was that distinction, you could tell. So even the operations were such that others were operating in northern, western part of Zimbabwe. Others were concentrated on the eastern, southern part of Zimbabwe. So I stayed at the ministry for some time, and then the authorities found it necessary that I be posted to Kabwe to go and become a regional military intelligence officer. After a year or two, I was posted again to Livingstone in the same capacity. We experienced the time when Zimbabwe became independent. And then after a very short time, I was posted now to Army Headquarters, which is here, and I was appointed Provost Marshal. Provost Marshal is the appointment that one holds to do police duties in the army, the maintenance of discipline, the investigation of cases, and things like that, you know. And I stayed in that job, I think, for quite some time. I stayed in the job for a long time until I was asked to go and do a staff college in Germany, in West Germany. So I was sent to go there, and I went with my family. I completed my course, and I came back. On coming back, I was appointed what we called that time Colonel GS. KNOGS stood for Colonel General Staff. He was de facto number 2 in the what we called G branch, which was responsible for training, operations, and intelligence in the army. I stayed there for a very short time. I think it was under 1 year anyway. And then I was appointed as military assistant to the army commander. But then it was General Simbe. I served as a military assistant for about 2, 3, 4 years or so, after which I was posted for a short time to go and be acting regional commander in Solwezi. I was in Solwezi for some time, and then I was brought back to Army Headquarters, where I was made Director of Research and Development. I held that appointment for some time until I was sent to the Ministry of Defense, where I became a Deputy Army Secretary. And then thereafter, I became Army Secretary. From being Army Secretary, the commander then decided that I should go to Ethiopia to go and open an office of the Defense Advisor accredited to Ethiopia and the African Union. That time it was called the OAU. So after my stint as a defense advisor in Ethiopia, I was posted back to Zambia. Now this time around to come and take over as Army Commander. So basically that's how I've risen from joining the Army up to the time that I became Army Commander.
Thank you, sir. Maybe the country may wish also to know your family history. Is Lieutenant General Lopa married? How many children and the like?
I'm a very happily married man to my wife called General Lopa. And we had, the 2 of us, we had 4 children. 2 of them one was in the Air Force, one was in the Army. But before I married my wife, I had a son, Chiramba Lopa. He's an economist and he's still alive. And I have a daughter right now and a son. So I'm a very happily married man up to now.
Thank you, sir. Maybe also the nation and the world at large may want to know how you got involved in the formation of some of the units across the country. You just made mention of one of them being in Central Province. Are you able to share with us now the history of, as regards the formation of these other units across the country?
Right. I remember very vividly that I found most of the units formed, and the only one I think I could have witnessed being formed at that time was Gonda Barracks, the 4th Battalion in Chipata. Some of the officers who had joined when I came back from Canada were just being posted to go to Chipata. But I know that in the process, as we kept on serving in the Defense Force, there was a plan to establish a barracks in Solwezi. And I was picked that I was going to be the commanding officer of that barracks. But somehow, in the pipeline, I think the plans were dropped for political reasons. So the other unit which was formed after the 4th Battalion Zambia Regiment was the 5th Battalion Zambia Regiment in Kaoma. And I think since then, the other units which have come up are special units, you know, like the one you find in Lopa province for special forces, and then in Ndola in Mushiri, again for special forces.
Were you at any point deployed as a frontline during the frontline state during the liberation struggle?
Yes, there is no officer, I think, of my intake who never went through that. Almost all the officers, starting from about 1967 to up to the time that the countries south of us got their independence, we all participated in a liberation movement, the struggle. I'm proud to say that I was involved in almost all operations, both, I mean, on the Mozambican border, on the Zimbabwean border, on the Angolan border, and on the border with Namibia. So I participated in all these operations. I've recorded them.
Is there any of them where you just want to pick something personal, okay, which you can share with us, your personal experience among these operations?
There were a lot of them. You know, we were escaping mines, we were, you know, all kinds of things were happening. But I remember one a very funny incident. I call it funny now, but at that time it was a serious incident. I was based in Chiawa with my platoon, the motor platoon that I talked about. When I received a message that the Zimbabwean soldiers were trying to enter Zambia at a place we called Kabanana. This is when you are moving from Chirundu to Chiawa. As you cross the Kafiwe River, there's a plantation called the Banana Plantation. It was a big plantation then where the bananas were being... So we rushed there, and then we saw these chaps actually trying to launch to come into Zambia. I deployed my soldiers, and I fired the first shot. You know, I fired at them. As to whether we killed people there or not, I'm not very sure. But then they returned the fire. What I remember was that when fire was returned, I think my buttocks might have been protruding, so I was shot at the buttocks, but it didn't go into the flesh. You know, just this hot bullet came and got my combat, a bit of my buttocks, and then that I'll never forget, because obviously it was a matter of life and death. It was not very serious. I was not seriously injured, and I continued commanding my troops until we repelled this attempted crossing into Zambia. But then there were a lot of other incidents which most of us went through. Some of, you know, like you are going and then the bomb, I mean, the vehicle you are in, you know, steps on a, goes over a landmine, the car is blown, and, you know, we went through that. Thank God we are still alive despite what we went through.